Welcome to section 2.2. In this section, we're going to take what we learned in the first section, which was about statements, and make compound statements. So compound statements are more than one statement put together. So I'll write that out here. So a compound statement joins two statements together. So most of the stuff that we'll be looking at are going to be compound statements because it's the compoundness of it that makes it, we're not quite sure what the validity is, and so we use our symbolic logic to find out if what we're saying is a valid statement or not. And so a compound statement joins two statements together. Those are usually joined with words and. So P and Q, right? Those two statements together. Maybe P is I woke up this morning, and Q is I ate breakfast. And so P and Q would be I woke up this morning and I ate breakfast. P or Q is also used. So or is also a very standard one to use, involving two statements. There's also if something happens, then another statement would happen. And there's also what we call the biconditional, if and only if, where it's true both ways, right? So I could say this: if you study, then you will get a good grade on the test. Right? So what that implies is if you put in study, then you'll get a good grade on the test. But it doesn't mean that somebody that got a good grade on the test studied. So I think we all have had that experience throughout our time in school, is that, we're in a classroom and we spend a lot of time studying and we do okay, we do well. And then there's somebody next to us, and they put no time in, they just came in and winged it and did equally as well. And so it's frustrating, but it's not an if and only if statement. It's, hey, if you study, then you'll get a good grade on the test. Something like this would be an if and only if statement. You will get an A in the class if and only if you have an overall percentage greater than 89%. So that definitely works. So somebody that they go to e-services and look at their grade first, and it says A. When they go to Canvas to look at their overall grade, it'll be a percentage in the course that's higher than 89%. Somebody that goes to Canvas first and sees a score, an overall percentage in the class being above 89%, knows before they even go to e-services that an A has been assigned, because that was the promise. So that's an example of an if and only if statement, what they often call biconditional, but you'll see that in just a minute. So I think I mentioned it in the last video, but everything's going to be put into symbols. So we need to have symbols that represent these different wordings, the things that make it compound: and, or, if, then, if, and only if. And so that's down here. So I'll just bring up this for right now. As you look at towards the bottom of the screen, and has a symbol of, we call it a caret, right? It's this upward facing, it's like an upside down V. That is always the symbol for and. With and, both things have to happen. And we'll stress this even more. Or has what looks like a V. And they call that well, let me just go over the symbols first, and I'll go back over it. Not is the negation, right? And you're already familiar with that. The not symbol See if I can make this bigger. I don't think so because it doesn't think it's a picture. It's a table. Not is that little wavy line called tilde. Right? I'm not sure why I'm not. Oh, because I'm on the eraser. It's this tilde symbol that's right here. If then has an arrow that points from left to right, points to the right. And if and only if it has a double arrow pointing back and forth. Now, if I go back up and we just look at them one at a time, I love that they put in the and but are the exact same thing. Both are and they call it a conjunction. You don't need to know the name, but if they use it, I want you familiar with it. Or is that V-shaped? It's called a disjunction, an inclusive or. Okay. Not sure what happened there. Not is that wavy line called the negation. If then is called the conditional or implication. If and only if is called the biconditional. So what they're going to have you do in this section is practice using these symbols. So when you first go into the homework, they're going to have 2 blocks of problems that are asking the same thing. They're going to give you some statements and then put a compound statement in words and then ask you to translate that to symbols. So here's an example of problems that are from 1 to 12 in the book. So this is from 1 to 12. So P is given to be in the problem, Tom is a cat. Q is Jerry is a mouse. Little r is Spike is a dog. Little s is Tom chases Jerry. T is Spike chases Tom. And what they want you to do is write the compound statement that they're going to give in symbolic form. So take a look at number 8. If Tom chases Jerry, then Spike will catch Tom. Okay, so if I go back up and look for the if then, I see it's an arrow. So if Tom chases Jerry, let's find out where Tom chases Jerry. That's S. Let me get my pen back out. That's S. If Tom chases Jerry, then Spike will catch Tom. Let's see where Spike is catching Tom. That's T. So symbolically, that's S arrow T. That is the symbolic representation of if S, then T. S is Tom chases Jerry. So if Tom chases Jerry, then Spike will catch Tom. If we go to number 10, Tom is a cat and Spike is a dog, comma, or Jerry is not a mouse. Now, you might have heard me say comma and be like, what in the world are you talking about, Jensen? We don't say comma. Where'd you grow up? And the reason why I want to stress the comma is we need to be able to put on proper grouping symbols. Tom is a cat and Spike is a dog is on one side of the or. Jerry is not a mouse is on the other side. So let's look for Tom is a cat. So Tom is a cat is P. And maybe you remember, if you don't, you can scroll up and you can see and is that upside down V. So P and Tom is a cat and Spike is a dog R. Now it has or next. So because of that comma, we're going to put these in parentheses to make sure we know that those are grouped together. Comma, and then it's or, and or is the V. Jerry is not a mouse. So if I go back and look at Q, Q says Jerry is a mouse. But this specifically says, if I use a different color highlighter, this specifically says, actually let me do it in red, not a mouse. So because of that, I have to have a negation going on, right? We know that not is the negation, so it's that little wavy line. Not and Jerry's the mouse is Q. P and R or Q. So again, the reason for the parentheses is because of the yellow highlight. I need to make sure we know that the and statement is done together before the or is applied. So here we have another one. Spike is not a dog and Jerry is not a mouse if and only if Tom chases Jerry, but Spike does not catch Tom. Well, that's a lot. Spike is not a dog and Jerry is a mouse if and only if. Well, let's go find those. Spike is not a dog, and Jerry is a mouse. So Spike is not a dog is the negation of R, right at the top there. And, well, we know what and is. It's the, not the V, it's the upside down V. Jerry is a mouse. Well, that's the straight out Q. So not R and Q. We're going to put that in parentheses, right? Because they're together. If and only if Tom chases Jerry, we can see that still at the top of the screen, S. But Spike does not catch Tom. Now, do you remember what but is? But's very specific, and it's good that they're pointing this out early. But is and. We know the symbol for and. But Tom chases Jerry, but Spike does not catch Tom. Negation of T. And we'll put that in parentheses. Because the if and only if is sending the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And we need those grouping symbols, and you'll see why later on, because of the dominance that takes place. It's much like order of operations in math, right? We would need to let the system know that we wanted to add before we multiplied, and we do that with parentheses. Same thing here. So why are they in parentheses? Let's come back to our highlighter. This is all before the if and only if, and this is after. So we need to group those together with the arrow in between. So you can see that they're both grouped. And you'll get a lot of practice with this. The next set of problems is giving you things in symbols and asking you to write them in words. So very similar to what we just did, just in reverse. So the negation of S, arrow, negation of Q. Well, we know what that arrow is. That's an if, the first thing, if Elton John. Now it's a negation of S, does not play the piano. Then, and then the negation of Q, Joan Jett does not play guitar. Okay, so let's make sure we understand why we're doing this. It was the negation of S. Well, here's S, and I gotta negate it. So if S is straight out Elton John plays the piano, then when we go to write it, we need to say, well, he doesn't play the piano. Negation of Q, right? Q is 2 lines above. Joan Jett plays the guitar. The negation of it does not play the guitar. So that's why we have those knots in there, because of the negations that are there. So pretty nice, and you'll get great practice with it. This is actually a very high-performing exam as a chapter, because it doesn't get too complicated as long as you're doing the work. So let's be careful here. The negation of R. All rock bands include guitarists. Do you remember what the negation of an all is? It means some rock bands do not include guitarists. Now, do you remember this symbol here? It's an and symbol, if I remember right. Let's go back up and make sure we remember right? I know, but, and you'll be well familiar by the time you come to the test, but that's an and symbol. So we have that on one side of the and now we have something grouped together. And that grouping together is an or statement. And so a nice way to group that together is and either Q. Joan Jett plays guitar. Or, what's S? Elton John plays the piano. And we're done. But that's a nice way to get that or to be compact in there, is to use that word either. So this will take you through problems 13 through 24. They're all very much the same. There's 2 blocks of them because they switch up what the statements are. And so that's almost all the homework right there. So again, it's just getting a familiarity with these symbols, using them to rewrite from words to symbols. and then seeing the symbols and translating those into words. So I think I mentioned before that there is a dominance, right? So it's basically an order of operations. And so parentheses come first, then negation, then, and it has here first, to last, then conjunction, disjunction, then conditional, then biconditional. In the following exercises, so the last part of the homework, it says this: for the following exercises, apply the proper dominance of connectives by adding parentheses to indicate the order in which the statement must be evaluated. So let's look at 26 and see what they're talking about. In 26, they have P and Q if and only if the negation of R. So if we're going to do this, we recognize that biconditional is the last thing. So if we're going to put in parentheses, what the computer's going to do, or what we're going to do, is we would have to do the and statement before we ever did the if-then statement. We would have to do the negation of R even before that, but I don't think it needs parentheses. We can absolutely put it on, but it's a single thing. We would basically do the negation of R first. Then we would do P and Q, and finally we would do the biconditional there. So it really would be first, second, third. And you'll want to remember that, and the reason why they're teaching it early is that's the way we would have to navigate a truth table, which is what we're ultimately working towards in order to establish validity of arguments. So if we looked at something like 29, I don't want to do an even one. Let me get something that's similar but different. Let's look at 28. 28 says P and Q, P and negation of Q, and R. So what would we do? Well, we're all tied here with one exception. So the first thing that would happen, if I were to put it in order, the first thing that would happen, go blue, is the negation of Q. That would be the first thing that would happen. Then you would do, go back to black. Then you would do in order from left to right. So the next thing that you would do, and I'll put that in red, is this right here. And then the last thing you would do is take that result and add it to R. You're never doing more than one thing at a time. So you do the negation of Q first. Why? Because it's first in the order of operations. Then you do the first and, the one that's farthest to the left, P and negation of Q. That's why I put it in the red parentheses, and R. It's kind of weird. It may feel strange to put these parentheses in, but just remember what you're doing is like, oh, this would happen first. This would happen next as you go through. I think everything else, actually, let's look at something like 30 because it will match 31 that will be your last problem. So let's look at 30. So 30 says Q goes to R. It does not say that. Let me back that up. Q goes to the negation of R if and only if the negation of P and negation of R. So we're going to look at our order of operations here. And negations happen first, so we would do both of those negations. I'm not sure I need to put that in parentheses. What would be next? My choices are an arrow if then, a double arrow if and only if, or an or sign. And according to this, the or sign would be done next. So it looks like this. Then it would be the conditional. So this would be the next thing to do. And then it would be the whole thing. I'm not sure if they do all of that, but it would be in that order. We would do this first, this second, this third, right? And I guess even prior to those, we would do all the negations first. But I'm not sure they're looking for those embedded parentheses. But it really just is to get you aware of the fact that there is a dominance in those. And so the parentheses that are used or not used is really important. There is a difference between something like this P and Q implies R, right? Because what would the order of operations be? Actually, let me write that up here. Get rid of this because you have that all here. I'm going to get rid of all these things and then rewrite what I had. P and Q implies R. If that's what you have, then that is definitely not the same as this. Okay, those are not the same as one another. Why? Because with this P and Q implies R, I have to do the ands before I do any of the implies, any of the conditional, any of the if-thens. So I would have to order it like that. So if I need to do the Q implies R first, I have to put that in parentheses. Okay. This is just sharing. Nothing changed from my original statement. It's 100% equivalent to this. I put 3 equal signs. That means directly equivalent. They're the same thing because we would have to do that. So for example, 3 times 2 plus 6. How would I do that? I would have to do the 3 times 2 first. I could put that in, but it's the same thing. But if I had 3 times 2 plus 6, and I had the 2 plus 6 in parentheses, that's a different answer. This is 24. This is 12. Right? And so they are different from one another. So you have your experience with the numbers, and it's here too with logical statements. So your goal is to go through this section and get to know these symbols right here, right? By translating words to symbols, symbols to words, and then looking at the dominance of power to finish out that homework assignment. I know it will go well. Thank you for watching.